So welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Tonight we have a very special guest for the official return of episode 10 of Masti with Satvik Saini. And tonight we have joining us Lorne Jenkins. Now, Lorne I went to high school with, we honestly didn't interact as much, but I knew of him. And now he's doing some really cool work with Mini Money Management, a company he founded and is the current CEO of. And today I'm bringing him on to talk about financial literacy, a little bit about Black Lives Matter, and everything that's been going on in our country. Now we will have him join. Adding him.
Oh, it looks like we should be good to go.
Lorne, hey man.
Oh, hey, how you doing?
Doing well. Can you see me okay?
Yeah, you can hear me all right?
Yeah. All right, dude. Welcome to Longmont. Welcome back to Longmont, actually.
Yeah, great to be back from London to Longmont, the real L town. That's what I tell people. Oh, God.
You spent a little time in London, and then you started Mini Money Management. Now,
Hmm.
walk me through a little bit, like what inspired you to start that, and why of starting this financial literacy program, especially for younger kids.
Yeah, so when I was in London, I worked as a foreign exchange broker for a little while. And to me, it kind of just felt like we were making rich people richer. And I think that, I guess I always knew what financial literacy had done for me. I mean, it allowed me to go to undergrad debt free. I was able to travel across Europe, see like 10 different countries, and there's a lot of people who didn't have those same opportunities. And so I can't take the credit for it. It's something that my mom did with me when I was younger. And so, yeah, I figured if it was a game that worked for me as well as it did, then apps are kind of the new, not the new, are the way that people are learning, the way that kids are learning. And so we decided to start an app to help teachers and parents teach their kids about financial literacy. Because, yeah.
So how does it exactly work? How does the app work? Walk us through a little bit of
Yeah.
functionality of
So
it.
It's going to look a little bit different from teachers to parents, but it's basically the same. So the teacher or the parent is going to be the CEO. They're going to be the boss, and they're going to hire their students or their kids, and they're going to get paid a salary. But just like in the real world, you have to pay for rent, you have to pay for laundry, you have to pay for food. And so we have kids literally just learning how to use money with their everyday lives. So for us, it was we kept asking my mom to go out to eat. So she said, okay, it's more to go out to eat than it was to stay in. And that was just how we figured out, okay, yeah, like it costs more money. And so for parents and for teachers, there's like the bonus and the fine functionality. So a lot of this happens automatically, but for the bonuses and the fines, it's like that behavior management. So any behavior you want to encourage is a bonus, and it's the yelling, grounding, screaming. You just give them somebody a fine. Now, as a kid, when you can use that money to go out to eat, or you can have in schools like an extra pillow time or lunch with a teacher, like now you're losing money to take away from things that you actually want to participate in. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And for the kids, we've got just basically like a mobile banking app. So they've got a checking account, a savings account. They can take out loans, buy items from a shop. So that's main money management as a whole.
I like it. So basically like the basics and foundations for everything
Mhm.
regarding financial literacy. I mean, and talk to me a little bit about like the behavioral aspect of it, like the consequences. Why include that in there?
Because at the end of the day, most parents don't want to teach, but they'll read parenting books. And I think that parents are always looking for different ways to be better parents. And I mean, at the end of the day, like kids need to experience consequences because that's what happens in the real world. Like you get a parking ticket and that's a fine. And I think that it's really important. And I think it's been a great movement that we've gotten away from like shaming kids. But I think we've almost gotten a little bit too soft. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like if you go outside and you say something to the wrong person, you can get punched in the chin. Like, and so I think it's important for kids to understand that some of your actions are going to have consequences
That's a
in
good
a
point. I
safe
like that.
environment. Appreciate it.
And honestly, you're doing great work because like that is something paramount. I mean, I don't know the stats, but if you look up any types of debt, like along with student loan, like credit card debt is just through the roof. And
Mhm.
like that where people are not understanding budgeting or spending below your means kind of is just important principles. And to be honest, like growing up in India, like my parents, Indians in general are kind of frugal. So that's kind of ingrained in me. Mom and parents did. Like similar for me. I was lucky to have that, but like great work that you're passing that on. So how's that reception been among the teaching community and even households, I guess?
Yeah, it's been really good. So I think what we've had to learn is how we have to talk to parents and teachers. So I would say financial literacy, and every teacher was like, "Oh, we've got that covered. Oh, we've got like a 2 week chapter book that we read, and that meets all of our financial literacy standards." But you can't really blame teachers because they keep adding standards, but they don't put more time in the day. They don't give them any new resources. They just say, "Hey, look, here's this whole new set of standards. Figure out how to teach on it." And so for me, their key word is classroom management because every single teacher has to put up with 20 to 30 screaming 7, 8, 9 year olds. And so this is just a more effective classroom management system that happens to teach financial literacy. And then when it comes to parents, their big thing is that we're making parenting easy. So again, instead of yelling, instead of screaming, instead of saying, do your homework, do your homework, do your homework, you're now creating an environment in your household where your kids are taking responsibility for what they want to do. So for us, I used to ask to do extra chores because I wanted to go play outside or I wanted to play more video games. And so for me, I was just taught at a young age that sometimes you have to do things that you don't really enjoy to be able to afford to do things that you do enjoy. And I think that that's like, I mean, that's a simple concept, but that's not a concept that everybody gets. I mean, I had a teacher who was out in Arkansas, one of my friends, and she started a classroom economy. And she said, because she was in a poor area, and that she opened up her classroom store for the first week, and there were more expensive items that the kids couldn't afford. And she said, well, the kids were like, okay, we'll just buy something else. And she said, well, why don't you guys just save up your money and buy it next week? And it was like a light bulb had switched on for them because that just was nothing they had ever been taught. But after that, kids were saving up their money 3, 4 weeks in advance. But again, that wasn't their household environment, and no one had ever taught them that before. So, yeah.
No, dude, straight up. And have you done any research regarding like, so why target especially the younger kids? Because when do they really start developing these habits? Is there some sort of science behind that you and your co-founder?
So they did a study, the World Economic Forum, and kids start to develop their spending habits by the age of 5. So, and it has absolutely nothing to do with how their parents are. Like, just it's whatever they experience, and like they have some kind of ingrained feelings about money, but by the time that they're 5. And I think it's really impressive, but St. Vrain just passed, so not this year's seniors, but next year's seniors have to take one personal financial class to graduate, which I think is amazing. But you're already 16, 17, and you could have potentially already started applying for student loans. So if you can learn these things younger, well, why not do it? And so the same way that you learn math at a young age, you should learn financial literacy every day at a young age. So instead of trying to fix the problem, we're trying to make it so that there wasn't a problem in the first place.
I like that, being proactive early on childhood. So as far as like curriculum goes, are you seeing any changes in curriculum over the years regarding financial literacy and
So and again, I'm newer to the market, but just from a little bit of research, they're basically in the stage where they passed and said, look, you have to teach financial literacy. Here are the standards. And again, which is great, except for teachers are just kind of winging it. So I mean, every teacher that I went to talk to, everybody had something different. They said, oh, well, here's this book. I mean, a classroom economy isn't a new thing. So there are teachers who are already doing it and they didn't struggle. But for the teachers who weren't, they were like, and again, a lot of teachers aren't financially literate. So they're not trained on it. They don't really have resources to teach on it. So, I mean, in terms of things are heading the right way because there are standards now, but that doesn't mean that there's good, effective resources for them.
I hear you. Yes, you find a nice little niche to enter with mini money management.
Hoping so.
Love it. All right, Lauren, let's get to another part of the conversation with everything going on in the world today, or I mean, America today. And then as a fellow Black man or African American, which do you prefer, by the way?
Honestly, I don't care. Black is fine. It's shorter. Yeah, gets the point across.
So, as a Black man, did you grow up in Colorado?
Yes, I moved here when I was 6 or 7.
So, growing up here, spending a majority of time in Colorado, and then overall with everything that's been going on with George Floyd, a terrible incident, and then stuff with around cops, and then everything going on. Tell me a little bit about how you feel as a Black man in this society today regarding some of this racism and everything going on today.
Hmm. And I always like to preface this with I'm not the spokesperson for Black people. So I just tell people my experiences and my feelings. So I like to always put that kind of disclaimer out there. Um, I think growing up in Longmont and Boulder County was a very unique experience because I moved from here to North Carolina and then to London. So that's three different types of racism, if you want to say it. But I would say in Boulder County, especially, it's not that much direct racism. It's a lot of ignorance. And I think ignorant can be like a hurtful word, but I think people genuinely just don't know any better. And so I would have people make comments, say things. I mean, even yesterday or 2 days ago, I went out to lunch with a friend and we were just kind of making jokes. And I said, oh, you can't like just, oh, that hurt my feelings. Or just making a joke like, oh, don't say that. But like, obviously everything was like lighthearted.
Mhm.
And the lady sitting at the table across from us was like, oh my God, like you guys like trying to make a joke about it was like, oh yeah, you got to be careful because you can't say anything to Black people these days. And then her husband like pulled out a phone and was like, yeah, we could make this go viral. Ha 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 ha. And I was just like, and that's the thing, like to them, it's just, it's funny. And I can see that because they don't ever have to experience it. So I can't be mad at you if you don't have the same experiences. It's not like you're coming from a place of hate. You're coming from a place where you genuinely just don't know. And so that doesn't mean I hate you. I really want you to know, but you don't. And
Yeah.
I guess you counter that with then moving to North Carolina. And my first day in North Carolina, I sat down on a bench after, took a red eye flight, was up all night saying bye to everybody. And there was a lady sitting on the bench next to me, and she scooted as far away she could and put her purse on the other side. So then you go obviously to North Carolina where you have that just blatant racism. And then you move to London and they've kind of got a different view on it. Like they almost think that they've surpassed racism. So like, oh yeah, I can't be racist because we're British and we're better than that, which is, I mean, just as harmful because there's systems that aren't great for Black people, but nobody wants to acknowledge it, or just people of color in general. So I think that I've gotten an interesting experience everywhere that I go. Yeah, it's just different.
Interesting. And part of the reason I wanted to really wanted to have you on, and I've been spending time like during everything going on, right, as an Indian American here, as an immigrant in this country as well, to understand what the Black community is going through and empathize and just really understand. Because even myself, I might be ignorant about some of those things. So I like the way you said ignorant, because a lot of people were ignorant about like my culture up in high school too, things you just didn't understand. Now. So that's why I've been trying to have a lot of conversations with people in my company, friends I knew, or people I've been reaching out to. So as far as like George Floyd happened, right? Like the death was terrible.
Mhm.
Obviously, tremendously sad and disappointing. And then the aftermath of that, regarding the movement and the protests, what are your thoughts on that? Regarding some of the looting and like the protesting going on and like the media's perception on it. What was your take on that?
Um, I mean, media is what it is. I mean, people are always going to look for a story. So I think the biggest thing with George Floyd is that in essentially a 15-minute video, people really got to see what it can be like to be Black in America. And I think the one thing that I heard this lady say, I can't remember her name, but she said that people should feel lucky that Black people just want equality and not revenge. Because for me, I mean, you keep having conversations with people. This isn't anything new. This is just the first one that people have been able to relate to, and the fact that we're in COVID-19 and people don't have anything better to do. So I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm tired. Like I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of hearing about it. But I would rather keep the conversation going now than to just have this be a one-time media cycle and then go back. And do I agree with the looting and violence? Of course not. But you can't keep a group of people down for that long and expect nothing bad to happen. And this may not be the greatest comparison, but I think it still kind of stands. Like, look at what happened after 9/11. They attacked, and on American soil, like a group of people attacked the US, killed a bunch of people. And we went to war for a decade plus. And so, how can you have a group of people who you enslaved couldn't sit in the same bathrooms, couldn't sit in the same bus, beat, raped, murdered, killed, anything you can think of, and then just expect them to take that lightly. So when something bad happens to white people, they want to have a war. But then when something bad happens to people of color, they're just like, oh, just calm down. It was a one-time thing. No, black people and people of color have been killed at a higher rate than white people. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of anger. And I don't think that everybody's acting in the right way, but can you blame them? Like, no.
No, and this is something like I was honestly didn't know how to feel about everything going on. And I know media, like left and the right, both, like just for example, Fox News or CNN, both are propagating their own. Like I saw Fox same video, both push their own narrative and just taking like bits of it. So I don't know what's going on. And I think as far as after reading about it, learning about it more, like I do think protesting, peaceful protests help, and but I think there needs to be some sort of economic sanction in a way, almost like a
Mm.
consequence per se, to actually affect the sort of change. And no way am I saying promoting any type of malicious behavior, but I think at a certain point, like you're saying, like some sort of economic sanction or some sort of price there
Mm.
does that become. I know, like what do you think? Do you think everyone involved, like there has to be some opportunists in that scenario, right? That are just looting for the hell of it, manages this opportunity, not with the.
I think what a lot of I think the good thing about peaceful protests and unfortunately the looting is that it brings a lot of attention to the cause. But I'm kind of a firm believer that talk is cheap and people will promise that things are going to get better. People have been promising for decades that things are going to get better. And so that's kind of the big reason why I did mini money management is because one of the biggest problems is poverty and is that people of color have a higher likelihood of being in poverty. And so I think that just giving somebody money doesn't solve the problem, or just taking back land doesn't always solve the problem. But I think I want to create a generation of financially aware individuals because then you can't be taken advantage of. Then you don't need to ask for a handout. Then you can, at the end of the day, money talks and money rule. People go to war over money. And so I think that there has to be something that happens now, but there also has to be something that happens to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future and that this can't happen in the future. So I love the fact that there's a lot of attention to it, but I don't want people to just talk. Like if you care as much as people say they care, then do something about it.
I hear you. I hear you. As far as like that's so true. Like money and financial literacy. So do you almost think this has almost become like a class issue more than like a race issue in a weird way?
I think it's a mixture because race is has to be a big part of it. Because I mean, even poor white people aren't treated the same as poor black people. But I think it's a combination. So I think the color of your skin and the amount of money you make has a very large impact. And you're already starting behind if your skin is darker. And so you take that and you put somebody in a worse financial position, well, then that's set up for failure, isn't it? So, yeah.
And then as far as like racism over the time, do you think how do you think it has improved? Because I know like a lot of people when we're very emotional or can be angry at times, like I think we hate admitting that we've come a long way. We still got a long way to go. But like, how do you think if it has improved, and if it hasn't, why so?
I think it would be foolish and disrespectful to say that we haven't come a long way because there is a generation, and a lady told me this lately, like there's a generation of people who have fought their entire lives and they've made a lot of progress. So I think it's unbelievably rude to say that we haven't made huge steps forward because we have. I mean, and I mean, at the end of the day, I can walk through my neighborhood and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get lynched. And that wasn't always the case. And so I think that yes, we've definitely taken steps, and I think we need to pay homage and respect what people did before us. But that doesn't mean that the fight's done. So is there still racism? Of course. Is it as bad as it was? No. Like it's not. But that doesn't mean
Yeah,
that okay, it's not as bad as it was. We're good. Like no, let's keep going.
I hear you. I hear you. And as far as like, because racism is like it's like murder, right? It's like something bad. It's, for example, I don't think it'll ever go away. Like some individuals will always be racist towards black people of
Mhm.
color, but I think there is a point we can reach when we're like we minimize it to the best of our abilities. You know what I mean,
Mhm.
right?
It's the systems that are the problem. So I always say this, like, you can, if you drive past me and you hate black people, okay, I'm still going about my day, probably gonna go get my breakfast Dorito. Like, I, you can hate me all you want, but as long as that doesn't impact my life, then we're good. But it's the point where when racism affects other people's well-being is when it becomes a problem. So when you start harming people, or when there's worse schools, or there's a million other things that can happen where racism then starts to affect people, because no, everybody's going to have their opinion. I mean, there's going to be people who are always going to be sexist. They're going to be racist. They're not going to understand different things. And fair enough. But that shouldn't impact a whole culture of people. It really shouldn't.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit more about systemic racism in society today, and what are your thoughts on that? And give me examples of it where you see it.
The biggest thing is with what's going on right now with police officers in schools. So
Okay.
Denver Public Schools got rid of them. Boulder Valley's looking at it, and St. Vrain said, "No, we stand by it because we're going to help. It's going to help with school shooters." If you look at the statistics, police officers in schools don't deter school shootings. That's not the case. And they literally said in their comment that we understand that people of color don't feel safe around police, but that's life, is essentially what they said. And so as there's what 2% of the kids in St. Vrain, not even, I think 1% are black, and they're essentially arrested at twice the rate as white kids. Hispanic kids are like 1.7 times as likely to get arrested or get in school suspension from a police officer in a school. So from the time that these kids are young, they're being discriminated against. So the school to prison pipeline is a real thing. If you're not in school, you get kicked out of school, you go to juvie. Well, what is that going to lead you to? You need an education to do pretty much anything of not pretty, but you need to be good at something. If you're not in school, you're not learning, you're not getting those essential skills. So there's a whole system there that's shaped against people of color from the time that they're supposed to be learning in school.
So wait, back up there a little bit. So Denver Public School is trying to get rid of police officers, and do you agree or disagree with that?
I completely agree because what they're replacing their police officers with mental health professionals and people who can actually deal it. If you look at the people who stop school shootings, they're teachers because the teachers have a relationship with the kid. Police officers don't stop school shootings. So Denver Public Schools, who is, I think 60% of the kids in DPS are free and reduced lunch. So it's a very impoverished school district and most of the kids are either black or Hispanic. And so they said, listen, we don't have a good relationship with the police officers. And I think they're phasing them out this year and they should be completely gone by the next school year. And St. Vrain doesn't want to do it because of where we are, because it's a bubble.
Wait, interesting. So let me get your thoughts on this, because some people say that that actually helps maybe community or maybe students and police officer relations, like a power authority. What's your
Mm.
take on that? You know, enough
I
or it
think there's
helps
better
them?
ways to do it. I do think that it's very important to have a good relationship with the police. I don't think school is the right place to do it. School should be a place where you go to learn, or maybe they have the police come in for a week and host a session. But the police are there to police in schools. So they're not there to make great relationship with the kids. Like their job title is to make sure that there's no trouble. So essentially you're just exposing kids at a very young age to being policed. So if you want to have a good relationship, host a softball game, host a pizza party, host a summer concert series, do something else. Don't be the police if you want to have a good relationship with children.
I hear you. And then you mentioned some of the statistics regarding like people of color, Black people, Latinos being, what was it again, that they get disciplined more?
So they're twice as likely. So essentially, they should account for like 100% of the arrests, like one. So 100% of the arrests means you're being arrested at the right rate. I think black kids are like 208%, Hispanic kids are like 170% or something like that. And white females are like 40%, white males are like 80%. So there's a problem there. And they've accepted that there's a problem. They said, well, we're just going to have to do something different.
Interesting. So what was the response? Did they say like certain were they trying to say like their behavior is involved in it, or did they say there's a problem with them actually disciplining people of color more?
They basically just said like, hey, we just need to train the officers better. Was kind of, they didn't really mention it.
Interesting. So, Lauren, let me get your take on this. While I was actually doing some research or like looking into things, like you brought this up example of some of the stats. Like, I'm not sure if you've heard of these people. Like, there are a lot of black intellectuals on the right side of things, like more conservative mindset, and they talk about a certain statistics or whatnot. Like Candace Owens, Larry Elder, Thomas Sowell. I don't know if you've heard of them
Mm,
or even some of them. But some of the things they talk about is like one thing that's been detrimental to the black community has been family structure.
mm,
Larry Elder said starting like I don't. I mean, I didn't fact check this completely. I looked into a couple articles, but he said around the time of like 1960s, it was family structure was a dual parent, or like kids outside of wedlock were like 25%, but over now it's like 75%, meaning three-quarters of black community families are single parent households. And he
mm.
said that on 5 times. He said, let me read it. 5 times more likely to be poor, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 more times likely to go to jail without a father figure. So, what is your stance on that? Do you agree, disagree, or even the right side of black intellectuals? What is your take on that?
I think if you look at what they're saying at the core, it's especially so I did a bit of research on Candace Owens, and how she started was essentially just saying, stop, don't just take everything you hear from either side as
Yeah,
truth. And a lot of that is black people are always Democrats. Like that's what you hear. People of color typically always Democrats. And so a lot of, and again, I don't disagree with, I mean, at some point, the base of their argument. But what happens is that to make more money, they get on places like Fox News, and then they have to be a little bit more brash, or you have to say something a little bit more wild because, again, it's must see TV. So if you look at the family structure is an issue, but it's a completely separate conversation to have when it comes to racism. So racism doesn't exist because black fathers aren't around. It's the other way around. So racism exists, and now black fathers aren't around because they don't have as many opportunities, because they need to work more jobs, because at the end of the day, black families have been torn apart since slavery. So I think they're two very different points to make. And yeah, probably just leave it at that. I think, and again, a lot of people, they get, I can't think of the right word, but essentially they start off with a base and say, okay, like just because you're a little bit to the right, let's just keep pulling you and pulling you and pulling you. And they get paid a lot of money to say things that people don't want to hear. So essentially, that's just their hustle. Yeah, you don't want to see it, but it is what it is.
interesting. But wouldn't you say it's the same for the left? People on the left side doing the same thing?
Of course. I mean, there was an article on CNN talking about how, oh, the Trump rallies are going to have increased number of COVID. Well, okay, well, the protests are too. Like, news should just be factual. So if you say, look, be careful when you're protesting because that's going to increase COVID. The left doesn't talk about that, but people need to know that. People need to hear that. Say, look, I'm all for protesting, but also I don't think 100,000 people should get COVID either. So let's do it the right way. So you can't just be, oh, Trump people are going to get COVID, but if you're protesting, you won't. Like that, how is that helpful either? And so I think that yeah, I mean, that's a whole media issue as a whole.
No, I think it's interesting, but I honestly think. Do you think the media is making it more of a race war in kind of uniting people, or the opposite? I have thoughts on this, but I want to hear yours.
Honestly, I don't really watch the news that much because of that. So you watch CNN and they say that, Trump is the Antichrist. And then you watch Fox News and for 8 years, they said Obama was the Antichrist. So yeah, I don't think either of them are the Antichrist. I mean, I have a preference, but that I don't think that either of them are the devil. And yeah, it's all to just make money.
I hear you. Money does talk. That's why you're mini money management, man.
Trying.
So let's talk a little bit more about the notion of privilege and what it means in society today. I see this term being thrown around quite a bit, and especially white privilege. So I have some thoughts on this. I want to hear yours first.
I mean, it's real. If that's, I don't know, because some people say white privilege isn't a thing. It's a thing. Um, I think the most harmful thing is to not acknowledge that white privilege exists. Because then, and I get that it's not an easy conversation. It's probably not something that a lot of people want to have, but you have it.
Yeah.
So use it in the right way, hopefully. But don't, I think it's very detrimental for people to say, oh, white privilege isn't a thing, because it is, just because you don't use it in the wrong way. Just because you were born a certain way. Like I was born a certain way and now I have to deal with my life because of it. And white people typically don't want to address that
That's
because it makes
interesting.
them
So in your mind or your point of view, how can that be addressed in the right way? Like got a white friend, how would he go about white privilege or navigate?
I mean, kind of a prime example. So we're trying to start something called the Boulder County Collective, and it's trying to get housing changed, education changed. And there's this group called Surge, and hopefully they don't mind me saying it, but they're essentially a bunch of angry white moms who want to get behind somebody and they say, listen, like this system isn't right. And the lady literally said, listen, like if you need us to send 100 angry emails and you need us to get on to people, then that's what we're going to do because like we believe in it. So at the end of the day, white moms have a whole lot of power. Like moms in general, moms crazy. But white moms, when you get them all riled up and together, they can make a lot of change. And so acknowledging that that exists and then saying, okay, how can we use this to help? And that's all you really need to do is say, hey, look, let's educate ourselves and then let's figure out how to help. Not, oh, let's pretend that it's not there because it is there. Like whatever situation we're in right now is where we're at. We can't just change it, can we? But we can use what we have and start to make a change. We can't just put your head in the sand and say, oh, this doesn't exist.
Interesting, I hear you. And to be honest, like my point of view on this is a little different because what I've seen it become throughout the last
Hmm.
couple of years. Immigrant man, like I'm Indian, I'm obviously not white, but like the notion of I think white privilege exists as well. I think a lot of privileges exist. A lot of people on an individual level have earned or unearned advantages or disadvantages with every other person. I think there's a lot of things going on there, right? Socioeconomic status, what skin color, other things. But as far as like the way it's been used today, it's like it almost diminishes a group in my end. In a
Hmm.
group, in a way, like if someone that disagrees with you, like people like to diminish it because of privilege or a certain way. It almost like makes villainizes them. So I almost think it doesn't unify us in a weird kind of way. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Hmm.
I hear
Yeah.
this. I think so too. But like, if someone is trying to say something and I'm just like, yo, you got white privilege, man, you can't talk about this, or hey, you got financial privilege, you can't talk about this, or like you did track, right? Like let's say if someone came up to
Hmm.
you and was like, yo, Lorne, you're just a privileged athlete. That totally discounts all the hours you spent at the gym or all the hard work you put in to reach where you were to be a D1 athlete. You
Hmm.
see what I'm the point I'm. That's where like
But by that same token, I also got to go to school for free. I also got a bunch of gear. You also get everything paid for. You get treated a little bit differently. So I think that to say that there is white privilege, but that doesn't mean that you have to talk about it all the time. But to acknowledge that there's white privilege is to acknowledge that other people are then disadvantaged for not being white, which I think puts people in a very uncomfortable situation. So I don't think, no, I think everybody should have a say. I say that, I might take that back. But I don't think you should be discounted from a conversation just because of the way that you look or because of your financial status. Like there may be things that you don't know, so you shouldn't talk about. But
yeah, yeah.
like, yeah.
It's just the point of like engaging in conversation, right? That's what this is all about. That's why you and I are doing this. But at times, like, because the problem with racism is the people, the perpetrators who are actually being racist, right?
Mm,
It's almost shifting, like especially in social media or whatnot. Maybe your experience with social media might be different than mine, but I see some. They're like, "Hey, if you're not posting about this, you are racist." I was like, "Wait a second, like, how is that? Like, that's
mm,
I almost diminishing people who actually go through racism when you're talking about like social media activism in a way. Like, come on, like
mm,
let's like the point that's reached. Like, oh, check your privilege if you don't post about this or don't think about this or in a different type of way, right? So that's where I'm coming
mm.
from. And
And yeah,
that makes
I get that. I do get that.
Yeah, but like the way it's been weaponized against people, like if someone is successful, you can't just say, "Oh, they're privileged," without
Hmm.
knowing, and that's hard to dismiss or hard to know in a group of people because it matters individually, right? You and I are different. Like athleticism wise, I don't know. You're probably more athletic straight off the bat. You can hoop, you can run. I don't know. Like you're a two-star athlete, right? So those type
Hmm.
of things, like that's an coming from. I don't know if that makes sense or even if you have a conversation regarding that.
I think racism is an overused. I think there's a lot of ignorance. I don't think everything is racist. I think there are
Uh,
people who could be doing better, but again, I can't fault you for not. Because again, if it's not something that you care about, then you're not going to do it, are you? Like, I don't want people posting just to make themselves or make it look good. Like, pick something you care about and do it. And like, if you care about animal rights, then go do animal rights. But as long as we're all trying to make something better, that's fine. And I don't think that anybody should be insulted or looked down upon because this isn't their passion. Like you can't blame somebody from that. Like I wouldn't.
Interesting. So like that post I was telling you about. So you're just like, that's as a black man, what do you think about that? If someone's not posting about BLM, is that worse, or the people who are trying to be phony about it, like to show people that they care but they don't? You know,
Um, I don't, I guess it's annoying when people are phony, but me personally, I prefer being genuine. So, I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't like black people, you don't like black people. That's tough. And I'm super sorry. But my mom always says, listen, like if I wake up and I'm walking down the street and you see me and I ruin your day, well, which one of us is stupid? Like, I didn't say anything to you. I'm just another person walking down the street and I had the ability to ruin your day. Okay. So no, I think that the problem with people just posting to look good is that's how news cycles come up and down. And for me, this isn't a news cycle. This is my everyday life. So that's why I
mm-hmm.
said I'd rather have people who are genuine about it because once this goes off the TV, once whatever big story is up next comes, those people who are genuine will continue to fight this fight. The people who were just posting for it, they'll be done posting and move on to something else. That doesn't mean that they're racist. That just means that they didn't really care. And if you didn't grow up and like I can't tell you where I'd be, but I woke up, I was born black. And so this is my experience every day. And that's why I have these conversations with people. But there's people who I was the first black kid they ever met in high school. Like, and so if you had no idea that this world existed, how can I fault you for not caring? Because why would you?
I see. So you're kind of like taking it upon yourself to introduce them to your culture and things,
Mhm.
especially with your friends.
That's why Yeah, and that's why I try to have these stories. That's why I try to write the stories that I did on Facebook and like have these conversations because a lot of times I even had teachers like message me like, "Oh my God, I really didn't know this happened to you." And I think just having those conversations, people genuine. That's why I say like it's the BOCO bubble. Like people here just don't know any better, and I don't fault them for that because why would they? But when we bring it to your attention and then you do nothing about it, that's when it becomes problematic.
I hear you. And then, Lauren, there was a question with one of my friends. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts on guilt?
On white guilt. Um,
Or actually, here, let me give you a story regarding where this might be coming from. So I had a comedian friend on this podcast, right? And he told me he was actually the people who were the most offended with his jokes were like liberal white people telling him what to say and not to say because they're deemed for them the hardest thing was like coming off as racist and trying to find that balance
hmm.
there.
Oh wait, I lost you for a second. What's the last thing you said?
Oh, my bad. So like that's a little bit of the context regarding like people having this sort of guilt because of their ancestors in a certain type of way, and how do you see that on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis?
Well, I mean, perfect example. They're gonna change Aunt Jemima. I have, and again, I don't speak for all black people, but I'm pretty sure a majority of black people don't give a shit about Aunt Jemima. Like, I think the syrup is great, But like, did I ever wake up, look at the syrup bottle, be like, wow, they really hate black people? No. Like, I think white guilt can send people down the wrong. Like, the battle we're fighting is not to have Aunt Jemima off of the syrup bottle. The battle we're fighting is to make sure that when a kid is born, he has the same amount of success to be successful, no matter where he's born across the nation or across the world, really. And so I think that the people who want to, and again, I just keep using Aunt Jemima because, like, even my mom was like, I don't give a shit about Aunt Jemima. Like, I want police officers. Oh, have you not heard this? So yeah, they're trying to get Aunt Jemima removed from the syrup bottle because they think it's racist. I don't
Oh,
care. Like, there's police killing people. There's so many other things we should be talking about than Aunt Jemima having to release a damn statement saying, "Hey, we're really sorry. You're syrup. You're a bottle of syrup. I don't care. Like, I don't care." There's so many other things. Aunt Jemima is the least of our worries. As soon as we get police officers to stop killing black people at a higher rate than white people, even just keep it the same rate, then we can focus on Aunt Jemima. But I don't give it. And that's where white guilt can kind of go sideways because then they just fight battles that they think people of color want fought. And that's why I say people need to listen because whoever got outraged about, I don't know for sure. And I don't know who started this Aunt Jemima thing, but I'm pretty sure they were white because there's so many other things we need to address. And that's how white guilt can be negative. But white guilt can also be positive because they see, and when you hear the right stories, and when people like read my Facebook statuses and they're like, that happened to you here, and they're like, okay, what can we do to help? That's a positive of white guilt. But no, there's a negative side, but that's life.
dude, um, this is so funny. So you think like people get outraged for a certain type of people for like when it's not really as big of an issue, kind of being offended for you as a black person,
Yeah,
black community.
yeah. I think they went to one rally or they heard one black person speak, and they're like, you know what? We got it. Like, no, no, no. You got to keep listening. Like, it's not just like a one time thing. Like, this is a we gotta, yeah, yeah.
I hear you. That's actually kind of funny. Interesting. So, like, how have people been reaching out to you regarding how have you been going about having your voice heard in this issue? You've been
Yeah.
active.
So I did that 10 days of racism challenge on Facebook, and excuse me, just posted like 10 just different racist incidents I've had here, North Carolina, London, and I think my biggest thing is I don't want I want to change the world, but I think I want to change my community first. So I want everybody in my life to understand, at the very least, what this movement means to me. Because if you know me and then I tell you my stories, that's a lot more impactful than something that you hear on the news. And that's so when we want to talk about media, I'm not on the left, I'm not on the right. That's why I always say, like, look, these are just my experiences.
Mhm.
Take it how you may. And so when I tell people about the incident that happened even on the weekend, or just the stupid comments that I'll hear from people, people just don't know. And so me personally, I just want to change the people around me because that's what I know I can affect, and that's why I know who knows me. And then hopefully get that gives me a bigger platform to change other people's lives. But shit, if I can get Boulder County, I'll be great to win.
Yeah. And then another thing, like recently I read this on social media. I know the Reddit's like CEO and co-founder did the same thing regarding like they stepped down from a position of power, like CEO or board of directors or whatever shit we're talking about, like high executive positions per se, to make way for a person of color higher. What are your thoughts on that regarding like how that leads to white guilt and if that's good or bad in your opinion?
I've got mixed feelings because I'm in the middle of starting a company. So I know that this is my baby. And it would absolutely pain me to have to step aside. But on the other hand, I think that's one of the most admirable things you can do. And I think that's somebody who actually gets it because, and I think he gets it because he understands that he can't be the one to make the change, but he believes in the change. So he'll let somebody else make that change. And I think that that's how you know that somebody really, either they're doing it for publicity or they're doing it because they actually give a shit.
Yeah.
And I think that at the end of the day, there's only so many stories you can tell. The Black or the people of color experience, either you get it because you lived it or you hear stories about it. And so I think that as hard as people are going to try, there's just some things that you can't get done if you're white. And that sounds pretty terrible, but that's just kind of how it is. Like when you wake up as a person of color every single day, that's going to change how you see the world. And so sometimes that change, that experience needs to be amplified. And I think that's what hopefully that's what they're trying to do and not just do it for publicity.
Interesting. So do you think there could be a similar thought process though, regardless of color, like me, you, and a white person? Like if we were both, if all three of us were like, of course, like all of our individual experiences shape who we are today, right? But as far as leading a
Yeah.
company, hey, mini money management, do you think we could have a similar mindset in a different type of way and like still lead?
I think the basics, so like we could both be business savvy and we could both like, care about people and want shorter, or like I think we could all have like very similar principles,
Yeah,
but there's something inherent about at the age of 16 and 17 getting pulled over and there being fear. And there and I think that there's probably experiences that you have that I'll never understand. And so I think that there's things that you just can't experience. Like there's things that white people experience that I never could. Like there's different ways that like people are raised that you'll never have that experience. But I think there's something inherently different, especially here, growing up and looking different from everybody else that shapes who you are, like to the
interesting.
core.
And then another thing, I guess the argument against that, if the intention is wrong, is that
Hmm.
nobody knows or only hired for a certain type of position due to the color of their skin, right? They don't want to be a diversity hire or a token hire. So that's another thing
Hmm.
that I think, because then people will hold that against them, like, oh, you only got hired. Like, I hate that. Like, if you were hired as just people of color, like, no, I want to be hired on my merit, right?
Hmm.
Not because like, oh, you're trying to do some self fulfilling thing. Like, if you actually do a position and give me an equal chance, kind of deal.
So I'm on both sides because on the one side, I've been introduced to people and everybody will say, hey, I'm it like, hey, this is Lorne. He's a Black entrepreneur. Meet with him. And I
Yeah.
take that personally because it's like, look, I'm building a great company. I don't give a shit what color I am. And so, and I mean, and it's for me, it's irritating because I want to be amazing because of who I am as a person, not because I got handed something because I was Black. But
Mm.
on the other hand, my mom was just talking to her aunt, so my great aunt, I guess the other night, and she was saying that her great grandfather owned a bunch of land, and which was super rare for Black people at the time. And I think it was because of it was either when slavery was abolished I can't, the time period isn't great, but something passed where they took half of his land and he couldn't do anything about it. So when you've had cultures and generations of people who have had things taken from them, well, then you have to give something back because now those opportunities weren't given to a lot of people of color. So I understand why you have to give people of color a leg up because they've been set back for so long. But I think my end goal is where in the perfect world, we're all in the same field and you're successful based on merit, not because of who you know, not because you're white, not because you're Black, but just because you are a successful person. But that's not the playing field that we're on now. But that doesn't mean that I have to like it.
I see what you're saying, but also that like perfect world will never exist, right? There will always be.
No, but look how far we've come in 100 years. So maybe in the next 100 years, we're not perfect, but we're a lot better.
No, I hear you. So have you ever been? This is an interesting question. It's just something I just thought of. Like, has anyone ever accused you of privilege in the Black community? Like a Black person, like, oh, he's doing this shit. Like he's privileged, man. Like
Um,
you know.
I mean, I get like oh, you talk white, oh, you're from the suburbs. oh, this, and that. But that's only, I mean, that's pretty much that doesn't happen past one or two times of meeting me because not to toot my own horn, but I've worked my ass off for everything that I've had. And so I
Yeah.
think the Black community, no, but I mean, that also comes from like just a sense of confidence and kind of how my mom raised me. Like, listen, people just talk. And so to me, it's a lot of words. Yeah, no, I can't really say that I have. I mean,
Okay.
there's little comments here and there, but not really.
No, I hear you. Okay, that's interesting. And then Lauren, as we approach like towards the end of the interview, like one last little question for you. It's a big one. So, did you look at your race as like a determining factor for your success in life, the outcome of your life?
Um, hmm. I think I've looked at my race and I've said, this is how I know I'm going to be successful. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, you start a few steps back, and that just is what it is. And so, Coach Mo always says you can't just be average. Like you always have to work harder. So I think for me, the way that I was raised, I was unbelievably blessed to have the family that I had and have like the people around me who always said, just honestly, you have to do more because of how you look, and you have to be excellent. And I think that mentality, yeah, it shaped how I am. It's why I was able to run Division 1 track for 4 years. Like, did it hurt? Yeah. Did I want to quit? Yeah. But my parents said, listen, you're going to get a degree because that's what you need to do to be successful, especially when you look like you look. That's why I got my master's degree. That's why I'm trying to start a company because I have to be exceptional to make it. I can't just be average. And I think that sometimes it's tiring. It's very, very tiring, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
Interesting. So it gives you a chip on the shoulder kind of deal, like you sense of pride and like making it out in
Yeah.
a certain type of.
And just
Yeah.
I think being that person for somebody else. Like one, actually that picture on my wall up there is I was on like a webinar and this black guy brought his son to like watch the webinar. I was like, listen, I just wanted my son to see someone who looked like him doing something successful. So to show people that you're not just an athlete. You don't just have to be a singer. Because as a Black kid, all I knew was what my mom and my dad did, and or I could play sports or I could be a movie star. And that was because I couldn't rap. So that was about it. And so I think that I think it's important to show young people of color that there's other options. Because when you look on TV, what do you see? And so I think that, yeah, I want to be the person that some kid who's like, I want to grow up and be like him, and he wouldn't have seen it otherwise, because that's important to me.
I like that. Dude, honestly, you're doing great work, especially with financial literacy. I think is a big pillar and foundation of outcomes or even success in life. So I think that's tremendous. It's so
Thank
great like that, like someone bring their son up and look up to you. Like you, I'm sure you had role models like that, or
you.
even your family or whatnot. Like now this kid can see you in a similar spotlight. That's,
That's what I'm going for.
all right, Lauren, do you have any other final thoughts or some things you want to leave?
No, I appreciate you doing this. Like this is cool. I like what you're doing. Keep it up.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate
Yeah,
an awesome conversation. I think much needed. I think just for viewers to listen into instead of just being funneled shit on social media. I think this is actually important. Things like this.
just experiences. So yeah, just listen and ask questions. And they're hard ass questions. They're uncomfortable, but they need to be talked about. So thanks for doing it.
All right. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Hey, take it easy.
All right. All right, guys. Well, that was episode 10. Lauren was an awesome guest. I hope you guys took something away from the conversation. And as always, I'm back on the grind. So this will be up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And please reach out if you have any other questions regarding any of my opinions or even Lauren. I'll have his information on there. And yeah, and I'll post a little bit about his company, Mini Money Management, which is doing great work. So check it out if you get a chance. And once again, have a good night. We're back, baby.